I'm Piper Collins, and I'm 29 years old. Last Tuesday morning, my future mother-in-law looked me straight in the eye over breakfast and said, "Your salary of $8,500 from today on will be directed to our account, dear." My fiancé Logan sat there like a statue. She wasn't done. "Don't even try to argue. It's this, or there will be no wedding." I should have seen it coming. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely blindsided by someone you trusted. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back 18 months to when this nightmare began. I was attending our quarterly executive dinner at Summit Financial Solutions, where I'd worked my way up to Director of Strategic Development over 6 grueling years. The restaurant was one of those places where the lighting costs more than most people's rent, and everyone speaks in hushed tones about market projections. That's when I first noticed Logan Bradford. Tall, confident, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He was sitting across the room with Robert Bradford Sr., one of our major shareholders. I knew Mr. Bradford professionally. Sharp mind, fair businessman, someone I respected. But this younger man with him? Complete mystery. "That's his son," my colleague Jennifer whispered, following my gaze. "Daddy's grooming him to take over the family investments." I watched Logan throughout dinner, noting how he listened intently to his father, took careful notes, asked thoughtful questions. There was something appealing about his earnestness, the way he seemed genuinely interested in understanding every aspect of the business rather than just coasting on family connections. After the formal dinner ended, I was surprised when he approached me at the bar. "Excuse me, aren't you Piper Collins? Dad's mentioned your department several times. Says you're one of the sharpest minds in the company." The compliment caught me off guard. "Your father is very kind. You're Logan, right? How are you finding the finance world?" "Honestly?" He smiled, and I noticed how it reached his eyes. "Intimidating as hell, but fascinating. Dad wants me to understand every moving part before I inherit any real responsibility." We talked for 2 hours. Logan was surprisingly easy to converse with, curious about my work, funny in an understated way, and refreshingly honest about his privileged position. When he asked if I'd like to have dinner sometime, I said yes, without hesitation. Our first real date was at a cozy Italian place downtown. Logan arrived exactly on time, held doors, asked about my day with genuine interest. Over wine and pasta, he told me about his business degree, his father's expectations, his own uncertainty about whether he was cut out for high finance. "Sometimes I feel like I'm playing dress-up," he admitted, "like everyone's waiting for me to prove I deserve to be here." I found his vulnerability attractive. Here was someone who could have anything handed to him, but actually wanted to earn it. "The fact that you're worried about proving yourself suggests you probably will," I told him. That first evening stretched until the restaurant politely suggested we might want to settle our check. As Logan walked me to my car, he said, "I hope this isn't presumptuous, but I'd really like to see you again." "I'd like that too," I replied. The kiss goodnight was gentle, tentative, sweet. Over the following months, Logan and I fell into an easy rhythm. Dinner dates twice a week, weekend brunches, occasional evening events related to my work or his father's business interests. He was attentive without being clingy, ambitious without being ruthless, wealthy without being ostentatious. More importantly, he seemed to genuinely admire my independence. When I worked late, he'd bring dinner to my office. When I stressed about presentations, he'd listen patiently as I practiced my talking points. When colleagues made subtle digs about my blue-collar background, Logan defended me without making a scene. "You've worked for everything you have," he told me one evening as we walked through downtown. "That's incredibly attractive." 6 months in, I met the Bradford family officially. Robert Sr. welcomed me warmly, clearly approving of his son's choice. "Piper's department has increased our portfolio efficiency by 18% this year," he told Logan proudly. Smart money follows smart people. Margaret Bradford, Logan's mother, was more reserved. Polite, well-dressed, the kind of woman who could make you feel underdressed in designer clothes. She asked careful questions about my background, my education, my family. Nothing overtly rude, but I sensed evaluation in every exchange. Logan's previous relationships were with girls from our social circle, she mentioned casually during one family dinner. It's interesting to see him explore different perspectives. The comment stung, but Logan squeezed my hand under the table reassuringly. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret saw me as a temporary diversion rather than a serious girlfriend. When Logan talked excitedly about my latest project success, she'd nod politely before redirecting conversation to family, friends, or social obligations. But Robert Sr.'s approval seemed genuine, and Logan's affection felt real. I convinced myself that maternal protectiveness was natural, that Margaret just needed time to warm up to me. Besides, Logan was supporting me in ways I'd never experienced before. When I mentioned wanting to pursue additional certifications, he encouraged me enthusiastically. When I doubted my readiness for greater responsibility at work, he reminded me of my achievements. "You're going places, Piper," he'd say, "and I want to be there to watch you succeed." For the first time in my adult life, I felt like someone was truly in my corner, someone who saw my potential and wanted to help me reach it. What could possibly go wrong? 8 months into our relationship, Logan started talking about our future together. Not in vague someday terms, but with specific plans and timelines. "I want to be established in the company before we get serious about marriage," he'd say over dinner. "I want to deserve you." The comment always made me smile. Here was this man from a wealthy family, heir to significant financial holdings, worried about deserving me, a woman who'd grown up in middle-class suburbia and worked 2 jobs through college. "You already deserve me," I'd tell him. "The question is whether I deserve you." "Piper," he'd say seriously, "you're the smartest, most driven person I know. My father sees it. My colleagues see it. I just hope my mother comes around." Margaret's coolness toward me had become more pronounced over time, though she maintained perfect politeness. At family gatherings, she'd seat me strategically away from Logan during dinner, engage other guests in conversations that naturally excluded me, or make subtle references to suitable matches for her son. "Logan's always been drawn to accomplished women," she'd say to family friends in my presence. Though, of course, there's a difference between professional competence and true sophistication. The barbs were expertly crafted, just ambiguous enough that calling them out would seem petty. Logan either didn't notice or chose to ignore them, which frustrated me, but didn't alarm me. His support remained constant. In fact, Logan had become my biggest cheerleader at work. When I mentioned struggling with a particularly complex client portfolio, he'd offer insights from his business school training. When I prepared for challenging presentations, he'd help me anticipate questions. When office politics threatened to undermine my projects, he'd strategize with me about navigation techniques. "You should be running that place," he'd tell me regularly. "Your ideas are brilliant, your execution is flawless. They're lucky to have you." His confidence in me was intoxicating. For someone who'd always had to prove herself professionally, having a partner who recognized my abilities without qualification felt revolutionary. That's why Logan's announcement about applying for a position at Summit Financial caught me completely off guard. "Dad thinks it's time I get hands-on experience in the company," he explained over dinner at our favorite restaurant. "And there's an opening in the strategic development department." I nearly choked on my wine. "Strategic development? That's my department, Logan." "I know," he said quickly. "That's actually part of why Dad suggested it. He says working with you would be the best possible training. You could mentor me, help me understand the day-to-day operations." The idea made me deeply uncomfortable. Dating the son of a major shareholder was one thing. Plenty of companies had similar situations. But working directly with him? That seemed like a recipe for workplace gossip and professional complications. "Logan, I don't know if that's wise," I said carefully. "It could create conflicts of interest, questions about favoritism. I've worked really hard to build my reputation there." His expression shifted slightly. "Are you saying you don't want me at the company?" "I'm saying I'm concerned about how it would look, how it might affect both our careers." "Piper," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "we're talking about getting married. Our careers are going to be intertwined anyway. This could be a great opportunity for us to build something together." The marriage reference made my heart flutter despite my practical concerns. We'd discussed it theoretically, but this was the first time Logan had spoken about it as an inevitability rather than a possibility. "Besides," he continued, "Dad specifically requested that I work with you. He says you're the person who could teach me the most about the business. That's an incredible compliment, Piper. He trusts you with his son's professional development." When he put it that way, my objection seemed selfish and short-sighted. Robert Bradford's confidence in me was professionally flattering. If he believed I was the right person to guide Logan's transition into the company, refusing would seem ungrateful and insecure. "I suppose if your father specifically requested it," I said slowly, "and if we maintain professional boundaries at work." Logan's smile was brilliant. "Absolutely. Complete professionalism during business hours. I'll report to you just like any other junior colleague." The conversation continued over dessert, with Logan outlining his plans for learning the business from the ground up, his respect for my expertise, his excitement about working together. His enthusiasm was contagious, and by the end of the evening, I'd moved from reluctant acceptance to cautious optimism. Maybe this could work. Maybe having Logan in the department would actually strengthen my position. Robert Bradford would see firsthand how effectively I could develop talent, mentor the next generation of company leadership. If I handled this right, it could be the career boost that finally pushed me into senior management. 3 weeks later, Logan started at Summit Financial. His first few days went smoothly. He arrived early, stayed late, asked thoughtful questions, and treated me with the same respectful professionalism he showed other senior staff. During meetings, he deferred to my expertise without being obsequious. When colleagues made subtle comments about our relationship, he deflected them gracefully. "Piper's been incredibly generous with her time and knowledge," he'd say when people asked how it felt to be dating his supervisor. "I'm learning more in a week here than I did in a semester of business school." The compliment always made him glow with pride. Logan's respect for my abilities felt genuine, his eagerness to learn authentic. For the first time since he'd announced his intention to join the company, I relaxed. That lasted exactly 2 weeks. The shift began subtly. Logan started arriving at the office before me, staying later, scheduling meetings with clients I'd been cultivating for months. When I asked about these initiatives, he'd explain them as learning opportunities Robert Sr. had suggested. "Dad wants me to understand client relations from every angle," he'd say. "He thinks observing your techniques firsthand is the best education I could get." But observing had somehow become participating, then leading. When I mentioned my concerns during our weekly department meeting, Logan looked genuinely surprised. "Piper, I thought you knew about these meetings. Dad said you'd been informed." I hadn't been informed. Neither had our department head, apparently, who looked equally confused by Logan's initiatives. After the meeting, I pulled Logan aside. "We need to talk about communication and chain of command," I said firmly. "You can't schedule client meetings without clearing them through me first." "You're absolutely right," he said immediately. "I apologize. Dad gave me such specific instructions that I assumed you'd been consulted. It won't happen again." His contrition seemed sincere, and I wanted to believe him. But a nagging unease had settled in my stomach. That evening, Logan suggested dinner at an upscale steakhouse to apologize properly for the miscommunication. Over expensive wine and perfectly cooked filet mignon, he was attentive, charming, full of praise for my professional expertise and personal grace. "I'm learning so much from you," he said earnestly. "About business, about leadership, about how to navigate complex relationships with integrity. You're amazing, Piper." By dessert, my concerns had melted away again. Logan was inexperienced, eager to please his father, sometimes overzealous in his efforts to prove himself. These were minor growing pains, easily corrected with clear communication. I had no idea that he'd already been having very different conversations with his father about my future at the company, the conversation that would destroy everything I'd worked for. 2 months after Logan joined my department, I finally felt like we'd found our professional rhythm. He'd learned to clear client meetings through me, respected the departmental hierarchy, and his natural intelligence was becoming an asset to our team. Better yet, his presence seemed to elevate my own standing with upper management. "The Bradford boy is lucky to have you mentoring him," Mr. Henderson, our department head, told me during my quarterly review. "Robert Sr. specifically mentioned how impressed he's been with Logan's development under your guidance." I glowed with professional pride. Mentoring the son of a major shareholder successfully was exactly the kind of high-visibility achievement that could fast-track my career advancement. If I could help shape Logan into an effective leader while strengthening my own reputation, this arrangement might be the best thing that had ever happened professionally. At home, Logan was increasingly serious about our future together. He'd started making references to "when we're married," rather than "if we get married," asking my opinions about neighborhoods for house hunting, discussing timelines for major life decisions. "I want to be established professionally before we take the next step," he'd say over dinner. "I want to prove I can be a real partner to you, not just someone riding on family connections." His consideration touched me deeply. Logan understood that I'd worked hard for everything I'd achieved, and he seemed determined to earn his own success before claiming me as a wife. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful approach I'd want from a life partner. That's why his phone call on Monday morning devastated me so completely. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. Logan's name appeared on the screen, which surprised me since he was supposed to be in client meetings all morning. "Hey," I answered. "Everything okay?" "Piper." His voice sounded strange, tight with some emotion I couldn't identify. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out completely before you react." Ice formed in my stomach. "What's wrong?" "I got a call this morning from HR about a position." "A position?" I repeated slowly. "Director of Strategic Development." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's my position, Logan." "I know," he said quickly. "I know how this sounds, but please let me explain. They offered me the role, and I accepted it." The phone slipped in my suddenly sweaty palm. "You accepted my job?" "Piper, listen to me. They said there were performance concerns in the department, questions about leadership effectiveness. I had no idea they were considering changes until they called me this morning." "Performance concerns?" My voice came out as a whisper. "What performance concerns?" "I don't know the details. HR said they'd discuss everything with you later today, but they made it clear that the decision was already made. I stood up so abruptly that my chair rolled backward into the wall. You took my job, Logan. You've been working for me for 2 months, learning everything I do, meeting my clients, and now you're taking my job? I didn't engineer this, Piper. I swear to you, I had no idea this was coming. Didn't you? The pieces were clicking together with horrible clarity. All those client meetings you scheduled, all those conversations with your father about my work, all those questions about departmental procedures. That's not what this was about, isn't it? My voice was rising, and I didn't care who heard me. Your father is a major shareholder, Logan. You think it's coincidence that his son just happened to be offered my job after 2 months of observing everything I do? Piper, please. You have to believe me. I'm as shocked as you are. Are you? I asked coldly. Because you accepted the position pretty quickly for someone who was shocked. There was a long pause. When Logan spoke again, his tone had shifted from apologetic to defensive. Look, I understand you're upset, but maybe this is happening because maybe you weren't as irreplaceable as you thought you were. The cruelty of the comment took my breath away. What did you just say to me? I'm sorry, he said immediately. That came out wrong. I just meant that if they're making this change, maybe there were issues you weren't aware of. Issues like what, Logan? Issues like dating your boss's son? Issues like training my replacement without knowing it? That's not what this is. Then what is it? I demanded. Explain to me how your father, who's been so impressed with my work, suddenly decided I needed to be replaced by his son. I don't know, Logan said, but his voice lacked conviction. You don't know or you don't want to tell me. Another pause. Longer this time. Piper, Dad did mention that he thought I might be ready for more responsibility soon, but I never imagined it would happen like this. More responsibility soon, I repeated flatly. How soon, Logan? How long have you and your father been planning my professional demise? It's not like that. What is it like then? I was practically shouting now. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I've been training my replacement, sleeping with my replacement, and falling in love with my replacement. You still have a job, he said weakly. They're not firing you. I laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. Oh, how generous. I'm sure there's a lovely junior position available somewhere in the company. Maybe I can work for you now, Logan. Wouldn't that be a fun reversal? Piper? No, I interrupted. Don't say my name. Don't apologize. Don't pretend this is some cosmic coincidence that just happened to benefit you at my expense. I love you, he said desperately. This doesn't change anything between us. This changes everything between us. I replied coldly. Everything. I hung up the phone and immediately called HR. Ms. Collins, the HR director said when she picked up. I was just about to reach out to you. About my job being given to someone with 2 months of experience? About the restructuring in the strategic development department, yes. Can you come in this afternoon to discuss your transition options? My transition options, I repeated numbly. We value your contribution to the company, Ms. Collins. We're confident we can find a role that suits your experience and skills. A role that suits my experience and skills. After 6 years of building the department's success, after training Logan myself, after countless late nights and successful client presentations, I was being transitioned to a role that suited my experience and skills. I hung up and sat in my office, staring at the wall decorated with awards and commendations I'd earned over the years. Awards that apparently meant nothing when measured against family connections and shareholder influence. My computer chimed with an email. Logan's name in my inbox made my stomach turn. Piper, please call me. I need to explain. This isn't what you think. I love you. We can work through this. Logan. I deleted the message without reading it twice. Then I did something I should have done months ago. I called my friend Sarah, who worked in employment law. Sarah, I said when she answered, I need advice. I think I'm being forced out of my job, and it involves my boyfriend and his father. Oh, honey, she said immediately. That doesn't sound good. Tell me everything. As I recounted the last few months to Sarah, patterns became clear that I'd been too infatuated to see before. Logan's strategic positioning, his father's involvement, the careful orchestration of my professional downfall. Piper, Sarah said gently when I finished, this sounds like a calculated corporate maneuver. The question is, are you going to let them get away with it? I looked around my office one more time, at the awards, the client photos, the evidence of everything I'd built. No, I said firmly, I'm not. But I had no idea that the real shock was still coming. The HR meeting confirmed my worst fears. They offered me a junior analyst position in a different department, with a 30% salary cut and no management responsibilities. A fresh start, they called it, an opportunity to explore new areas of the company. I listened to their euphemistic explanations with growing rage. 6 years of exemplary performance evaluations, department growth, and client satisfaction had been erased overnight in favor of nepotism and family connections. "I'll need time to consider your offer," I told them coolly, though we all knew I'd never accept such a humiliating demotion. Walking out of that meeting, I felt professionally murdered. Logan had called me 6 times since our morning conversation, left voicemails I refused to listen to, sent texts I deleted unread. I couldn't bear to hear whatever justifications he'd prepared for destroying my career. Instead, I drove home to my apartment and poured a large glass of wine, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. The man I'd fallen in love with, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my professional guidance, had systematically dismantled everything I'd worked for. My phone buzzed with another call from Logan. This time, I answered. "What?" I snapped. "Piper, thank God. Please, I need to see you. I need to explain what really happened." "I know what really happened, Logan. You and your father planned this. You used me to learn my job, then took it." "That's not true," he said, but his voice lacked the conviction I needed to hear. "Then explain it to me. Explain how your father, who praised my work consistently, suddenly decided his son with zero experience was better qualified for my position." There was a long pause. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "Dad? Dad has concerns about mixing family and business, about potential conflicts of interest." I felt like he'd slapped me. "So, I'm the conflict of interest? Not you, the shareholder's son who's been handed my job. Me, the person who's worked here for 6 years. He thinks it would be cleaner if we weren't working in the same department." "Cleaner," I repeated. "So instead of moving you to another department, they're giving you mine." "Piper, no, Logan, stop. Just stop talking." I was crying now, tears of rage and betrayal streaming down my face. "You let them destroy my career. You accepted my job, and now you're calling me to explain why it was necessary." "I love you," he said desperately. "This doesn't have to change anything between us." "How can you say that?" I sobbed. "How can you possibly think this doesn't change everything? You chose your career over mine, your family over mine, your future over ours. That's not what I did." "Then what did you do, Logan? Because from where I'm sitting, you sold me out for a promotion." The line went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, colder. "Maybe you should consider that if they chose me over you, there were reasons you're not seeing." The cruelty of it took my breath away. "Are you suggesting I deserve this?" "I'm suggesting that maybe you're not as indispensable as you thought you were. Maybe your performance wasn't as stellar as you believed." I hung up without saying goodbye. For the next 3 hours, I sat on my couch crying and drinking wine, staring at my phone and fighting the urge to call Logan back, to scream at him, to demand a better explanation. Part of me hoped he'd call again, apologize for his cruel words, restore some faith in the man I thought I'd known. He didn't call. Instead, I received a text from my friend Jennifer at work. "Board meeting this afternoon. Something big happening in strategic development. Are you okay?" I was decidedly not okay. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit and returned to Summit Financial for what I assumed would be my final day. I planned to clean out my office, say goodbye to colleagues, and begin the humiliating process of job hunting after being essentially forced out. Instead, I was summoned to the boardroom. "Ms. Collins," Robert Bradford Sr. said as I entered the conference room where all the company's major shareholders sat around the polished table. "Please have a seat." I sat, confused and wary. Logan was nowhere to be seen. "We've asked you here," Mr. Bradford continued, "to discuss a change in your employment status." Here it comes, I thought. The formal termination disguised as mutual agreement. Effective immediately, you're being promoted to Senior Director of Strategic Development, with expanded oversight of 3 additional departments. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your salary will increase to $8,500 per month, plus quarterly performance bonuses based on departmental success. You'll also receive stock options and a company car." The room seemed to spin slightly. "I don't understand. Yesterday I was told my position was being eliminated." Mr. Bradford's expression hardened. "Yesterday there was some confusion about personnel decisions. That confusion has been resolved. What about Logan?" "Logan is no longer with the company," he said simply. What happened?" Mr. Bradford leaned back in his chair. "Let's just say that your email prompted an investigation that revealed behaviors I couldn't ignore as both a father and a businessman. Your qualifications, however, have been consistently undervalued. We're correcting that oversight." I sat in stunned silence as the board members outlined my new responsibilities, my expanded team, my enhanced compensation package. Everything I dreamed of professionally was being handed to me, but I was too shocked to process it properly. Do you accept the position, Miss Collins? Mr. Bradford asked finally. Yes, I said automatically. Yes, of course. Excellent. Your new office is on the 15th floor. Executive level. We'll have your things moved up today. As I left the boardroom in a daze, my phone buzzed with a call from Logan. This time I answered immediately. Piper, he said, his voice hollow. Did you hear about my termination? I just came out of the board meeting, I said carefully. Dad fired me because of you, he said bitterly, because you complained about me getting your job. Logan, I never complained to your father. I haven't spoken to him since this started. Someone did. Someone convinced him that I was unqualified, that you deserved the promotion instead. Maybe he realized it was true. This is all your fault, he said, his voice rising. I lost my job because of you. You lost your job because you accepted a position you weren't qualified for, I replied evenly. I lost mine because your family decided to play games with my career. Now I'm getting it back, with interest. I hope you're happy, he said coldly. I am, I lied, because despite the professional victory, despite the vindication, I was heartbroken. The man I'd loved had revealed himself to be someone I didn't recognize. Piper, Logan said, his voice suddenly desperate again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you. We can get through this. Let me take you to dinner tonight. Let me explain everything. I looked around at my old office, soon to be packed up and moved to the executive floor. At the career I'd almost lost and had now recovered in spectacular fashion. Okay, I said softly. Dinner tonight. Really? Really? Because despite everything, part of me still hoped we could salvage something from the wreckage. Part of me still believed the man I'd fallen in love with was real, buried somewhere beneath the corporate manipulation and family pressure. Part of me thought love might be enough to overcome betrayal. I was wrong about that too. But dinner would lead to something I never expected. Something that would change everything again. Dinner that night was at Marcel's, the French restaurant where Logan had first told me he loved me 6 months earlier. He'd chosen the location deliberately, I realized, an attempt to recreate the intimacy and trust of happier times. Logan was waiting when I arrived, looking haggard in a way I'd never seen before. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his confident posture replaced by nervous energy. Piper, he stood as I approached the table. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I sat across from him, studying his face for signs of the man I'd fallen in love with. I almost didn't. I need you to know how sorry I am, he said immediately. About everything. About the job situation. About what I said on the phone. About how this all played out. Which part are you sorry about, Logan? Taking my job or getting caught? He winced. I'm sorry for hurting you, for not protecting you, for not being honest about what my father was planning. So you did know. He was quiet for a long moment. I knew Dad was considering changes in the department. I knew he wanted me to take on more responsibility. But I swear to you, Piper, I didn't know they were planning to replace you until HR called me yesterday morning. And you said yes immediately. I panicked, he admitted. Dad had been building up to this for weeks, talking about my future with the company, my readiness for leadership roles. When they offered me the position, I felt like I couldn't say no without disappointing him. So you disappointed me instead. I made a terrible mistake, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I didn't pull away, though I wanted to. I should have consulted you first. I should have considered how it would affect your career. You should have declined the position entirely. You're right, he said immediately. You're absolutely right. I was selfish and short-sighted and completely wrong. The waiter appeared to take our orders, providing a momentary respite from the emotional intensity. Logan ordered wine, a good vintage, expensive, another gesture aimed at recreating better times between us. Tell me about your day, he said when we were alone again. About the promotion. It's everything I've worked toward for years, I said carefully. Senior director, expanded responsibilities, significant salary increase. Your father was very generous. Logan's jaw tightened slightly. Dad feels guilty about what happened. He's trying to make amends. Is that what you think this is? Guilt? Isn't it? I sipped my wine, considering how much to reveal. Your father told the board that your qualifications for leadership had been overestimated, that mine had been consistently undervalued. He said that in front of everyone? Yes. Logan stared into his wine glass. He destroyed my reputation to save yours. Maybe he told the truth to correct a mistake. Maybe, Logan said, but his voice was bitter. Our appetizers arrived, providing another brief interruption. Logan barely touched his food while I found myself surprisingly hungry. The stress of the last 48 hours had left me emotionally drained, but oddly clear-headed. Piper, Logan said finally, I know I have a lot of work to do to earn back your trust. I know I hurt you in ways that might be unforgivable, but I love you. I want to marry you. I want us to build a life together. The proposal hung in the air between us like a question mark. Are you asking me to marry you? I said softly. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that what happened was a mistake, not a revelation about who I am. I studied his face, looking for signs of sincerity or manipulation. Logan seemed genuinely remorseful, genuinely frightened of losing me. But then again, he'd seemed genuine about many things that had turned out to be calculated. If we were to move forward, I said carefully, things would have to be different. Anything, he said immediately. Whatever you need. Complete honesty. About your family, about business, about everything. Done. And boundaries with your parents regarding our relationship. Absolutely. And time. I need time to trust you again, Logan. I can't just pretend this didn't happen. I understand. The waiter returned to clear our plates and offer dessert. Logan declined for both of us, apparently eager to continue our conversation. Piper, he said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. I bought this 3 weeks ago. Before any of this happened, I was planning to propose at the end of the month, after I'd proven myself at the company. My heart stopped. The ring box sat on the white tablecloth between us like a small blue bomb. I know the timing is terrible, he continued. I know you need time to trust me again, but I want you to know that my feelings for you, my intentions toward you, were real before this mess happened, and they're real now. Logan, you don't have to answer tonight. Just know that I'm serious about us, about making this right. He opened the box. The ring was stunning. A classic solitaire setting with a flawless diamond that caught the restaurant's soft lighting perfectly. Elegant, tasteful, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. It's beautiful, I whispered. Like you, he said simply. Piper Collins, will you marry me? The question I'd been hoping to hear for months had finally arrived, but under circumstances I'd never imagined. The man I loved was asking me to marry him on the same day he'd lost his job because of professional betrayal that had nearly destroyed my career. Logan, I said slowly, I need to think about this. I need time to process everything that's happened. Of course, he said quickly. Take all the time you need. I'll wait. And a need to understand your family's role in all of this. The truth about what your father was planning, what your mother thinks about me, what kind of pressure you were under. I'll tell you everything, he promised. Every conversation, every consideration, every moment I should have handled differently. I reached out and closed the ring box gently. Then ask me again in a month. If you can be completely honest about what happened, if you can show me that this was truly a mistake rather than a pattern, if you can prove that you'll choose us over family pressure, ask me again. 1 month, he said solemnly. I can do that. Good, I said, standing. Because Logan, I do love you. Despite everything that's happened, I do love you. But love isn't enough if I can't trust you to protect what we're building together. He stood as well, pulling out his wallet to pay for dinner. I'll earn back your trust, Piper. I promise you that. As we walked to our cars, Logan asked quietly, Can I call you tomorrow? Yes, I said. But Logan, no games, no manipulation, no family pressure, just honesty. Just honesty, he agreed. I drove home that night with my emotions in chaos. The ring had been perfect, his proposal genuine, his remorse seemingly authentic. But trust, once broken, would take time to rebuild. What I didn't know was that Margaret Bradford had very different plans for our relationship's future. Plans that would reveal themselves on what should have been the happiest morning of my life. 3 weeks after Logan's proposal, I finally said yes. Not because the month was up, but because he'd kept every promise he made that night at Marcel's. He'd called every day without being pushy, shared detailed explanations about his father's business plans and his own uncertainties. And most importantly, he'd shown me text messages from his mother that revealed exactly how she felt about our relationship. She thinks I'm settling, he told me one evening as we walked through Central Park. She actually used that word, said I was settling for someone beneath my station. The honesty stung, but it also explained a lot about Margaret's cold behavior toward me. At least now I knew where I stood. And how did you respond to that? I asked. I told her that if she couldn't accept the woman I love, she wouldn't have much access to our future children. The threat was more aggressive than I'd expected from Logan, who usually tried to keep peace with his parents. You said that to your mother? I said exactly that. Piper, you're going to be my wife. My family needs to understand that respecting you isn't optional. It was the first time Logan had used the word wife with such certainty, and it made my heart race. Despite everything we'd been through, I wanted to believe in our future together. So when he proposed again, properly this time, on a Saturday evening at the Botanical Gardens where we'd had our 3rd date, I said yes without hesitation. The ring fit perfectly. Logan's joy was infectious, his relief obvious. As he spun me around in the garden gazebo, I allowed myself to believe that we'd weathered the worst storm our relationship would face. I was spectacularly wrong about that. The engagement announcement in the society pages generated exactly the response I'd expected from his family. Robert Sr. called to congratulate us warmly and offered to host an engagement party. Logan's sister sent a thoughtful card. His extended family members reached out with genuine excitement. Margaret's response was notably absent. "She'll come around," Logan assured me when I mentioned his mother's silence. "She just needs time to adjust to the idea. Or she needs to accept that her son is an adult who can make his own decisions," I replied. "That too," he grinned. "But you know how mothers can be about their precious sons." Planning the wedding became a delicate dance between my vision for our special day and the Bradford family expectations. Margaret finally emerged from her sulk to insert herself into every decision, from venue selection to catering choices to guest list approval. "The Bradford family has certain traditions," she explained during our first official wedding planning meeting at her home. "Standards that must be maintained." I bit my tongue and smiled politely as she outlined her requirements. A formal church ceremony, a reception at the country club, an orchestra rather than a DJ, specific floral arrangements that complemented the Bradford family colors. "Of course we'll pay for everything," she added, as if this generosity justified her controlling behavior. "We insist on giving Logan and his bride the wedding they deserve." The wedding they deserve. Not the wedding we want, but the wedding that meets Bradford family standards. "That's very generous," I said carefully, though Logan and I would like some input into the details. Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Naturally, dear. Though I do hope you'll trust my experience with these matters. I've planned several weddings in our social circle." Logan, to his credit, pushed back against some of his mother's more extreme demands. When she insisted on a guest list of 300 people, mostly Bradford family friends and business associates, he negotiated it down to 150. "Piper has family and friends too," he told his mother firmly. "This is our wedding, not a Bradford family networking event." Still, the final guest list was heavily weighted toward people I'd never met, and the venue, the most exclusive country club in the city, felt more like Margaret's second wedding than mine. The dress shopping experience epitomized our entire relationship dynamic. Margaret had made appointments at 3 boutiques she'd selected, all featuring the type of traditional, conservative gowns she thought appropriate for a Bradford family bride. "Something classic," she told the consultant at our first appointment. "Elegant. Appropriate for our family's position in the community." I tried on dress after dress that met Margaret's criteria, while feeling increasingly disconnected from what should have been one of the most exciting days of wedding planning. Every gown was beautiful, expensive, and completely wrong for my personality. "This one is perfect," Margaret announced as I emerged from the dressing room in a cathedral train ball gown that made me feel like I was wearing a costume. "So sophisticated." Logan, who'd been largely silent during the appointment, finally spoke up. "Piper, what do you think? Do you love it?" "It's beautiful," I said diplomatically, avoiding the direct question. "But do you love it?" he pressed. I looked at myself in the 3-way mirror, seeing a stranger wearing someone else's dream dress. "I think I'd like to keep looking." Margaret's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, dear. Though I should mention that ordering takes 12 weeks, and we're already cutting it close." The subtle pressure was expertly applied, but Logan surprised me by standing firm. "Mom, if Piper wants to keep looking, we keep looking. The dress is important." That afternoon, Logan took me to a small boutique I'd admired but never mentioned. "Try on whatever you want," he said. "No family pressure, no time constraints. Just find the dress that makes you feel like yourself." I found it on the 3rd try. A sleek, modern gown with delicate beading and a flowing train that felt both elegant and authentically. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Logan's expression told me everything I needed to know. "That's the one," he said softly. "That's my bride." The dress cost twice what Margaret had budgeted, but Logan didn't hesitate to pay the difference. "This is what you want," he said simply. "This is what you should have." In moments like those, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with him despite his family's complications. 2 weeks before the wedding, all the pieces seemed to be falling into place. The venue was booked, the flowers arranged, the catering confirmed. My dress hung in my closet like a promise of the future we were building together. Logan and I had settled into a comfortable routine of shared dinners, wedding planning sessions, and long conversations about our hopes for married life. He was attentive without being clingy, excited about our future without being unrealistic about the challenges we'd face blending our very different backgrounds. "I know my family can be difficult," he told me one evening as we reviewed the final guest count, "but I need you to know that you come first. Always. Whatever happens, whatever pressure they apply, you're my priority." "I know that," I said, and I meant it. Logan had proven his commitment to me repeatedly over the past few months. What I didn't know was that Margaret Bradford had one final test planned for our relationship, a test that would reveal exactly what kind of man I was really marrying, and what kind of family I was about to join. The morning of our wedding would bring revelations that would change everything forever. Our wedding day dawned crisp and clear, exactly the kind of October morning I'd dreamed of when we first set the date. The hotel suite was filled with autumn flowers, my dress hung perfectly pressed by the window, and my bridesmaids were due to arrive in an hour for champagne and preparation photos. I should have been nervous, excited, overwhelmed with bridal emotions. Instead, I felt strangely calm as I sipped my morning coffee and watched Logan sleep peacefully in the bed beside me. In a few hours, I'd officially become Mrs. Logan Bradford, joining one of the city's most prominent families. The thought should have thrilled me. Instead, it felt surreal. Logan stirred as sunlight crept across the bed. "Good morning, Mrs. Bradford-to-be," he said sleepily, pulling me closer. "Good morning, Mr. Bradford," I replied, letting him kiss my neck softly. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, fully awake now. "Are you?" I countered. "I've been ready since our second date," he said confidently. "Though I have to admit I'm nervous about the ceremony. All those people watching, all those expectations." "Your mother's expectations," I corrected gently. "Everyone's expectations," he said, "but especially yours. I want today to be perfect for you, Piper." His sincerity touched me, as it always did. Whatever flaws Logan had, whatever family complications we'd navigate, his love for me felt genuine. A knock at the door interrupted our morning intimacy. "Room service," a voice called. "I didn't order anything," I said, confused. Logan shrugged. "Maybe Mom sent something. You know how she likes to handle details." He wrapped a robe around himself and opened the door to admit a hotel staff member with an elaborate breakfast service. Fresh fruit, pastries, champagne, orange juice, and coffee arranged beautifully on a rolling cart. "Compliments of the Bradford family," the server announced. "With best wishes for your wedding day." As the server left, Logan started arranging plates. "See, Mom's trying to be thoughtful." I was reaching for a piece of fruit when another knock came at the door. This time, Logan looked through the peephole before opening it. "Mom," he said, stepping aside to let Margaret Bradford enter our suite. She was already fully dressed and perfectly composed at 8 in the morning, wearing an elegant navy dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless, her smile bright and artificial. "Good morning, darlings," she said, air-kissing Logan before turning to me. "Piper, you look lovely, though you might want to start getting ready soon. The photographers will be here before you know it." "I have plenty of time," I said politely. "Would you like some coffee?" "That's sweet of you to offer, but I actually came to discuss something important with both of you." She sat at the small table near the window, gesturing for Logan and me to join her. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten with unease. "What did you want to discuss, Mom?" Logan asked, settling into the chair across from her. Margaret smiled, that practiced smile I'd grown to distrust. "Just some practical matters, really. Nothing dramatic." She opened her purse and withdrew a folder of documents. "I've been working with our accountant on some financial arrangements for after the wedding." "Financial arrangements?" I asked. "Well, yes, dear. When you marry into the Bradford family, certain practical considerations become relevant." Logan frowned. "Mom, we've already discussed the prenup. Piper and I both signed it." "This isn't about the prenup, darling. This is about household management." She spread several papers across the table between us. Bank account statements, investment documents, household budget projections. "As you know, Piper, our family takes financial responsibility very seriously. We've always believed that money should be managed by those with the most experience handling significant assets." I glanced at Logan, who was studying the documents with growing confusion. "What exactly are you suggesting, Mom?" Margaret's smile never wavered. "I'm suggesting that Piper's salary should be managed through the family accounts. For efficiency, you understand. For proper tax planning and investment strategies." The words hung in the air for several seconds before their full meaning registered. "You want my paycheck to go into your account?" I said slowly. "The family account, yes. Logan's trust fund, your salary, the various investment returns, all managed together for maximum benefit. My salary that I earn at my job," I clarified. "Of course, dear. Your impressive salary of $8,500 per month, plus bonuses. It's quite remarkable, really, what you've achieved professionally." The praise felt like poison wrapped in sugar. Logan shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, I'm not sure Piper and I have discussed anything like this." "Well, that's why I'm bringing it up now," Margaret said brightly. "Better to establish these arrangements clearly from the beginning." I looked directly at her, my voice carefully level. "Mrs. Bradford, Are you saying that my paycheck should go directly into an account controlled by your family? Controlled by Logan, primarily. Though Robert and I would naturally provide guidance on investment decisions and tax strategies, we have so much more experience with significant money management. The insult was expertly crafted and delivered with a smile. And what would I have access to for my personal expenses? I asked. An allowance, naturally. A generous allowance for clothing, personal items, entertainment, whatever a young woman might need. An allowance from my own earnings. I turned to Logan, waiting for him to object, to defend me, to explain to his mother why her proposal was completely unacceptable. He said nothing. Logan? I prompted softly. He was staring at the documents, his jaw tight with tension. This is a lot to process, Mom. Maybe we should discuss this after the honeymoon. Oh, but we need to establish the account arrangements before you leave for Italy, Margaret said smoothly. The bank requires advance notice for significant direct deposit changes. Still, Logan said nothing definitive. No rejection of his mother's outrageous demand, no defense of my financial independence, no protection of my dignity. Margaret continued as if his silence was agreement. I know it seems overwhelming, dear, but you'll appreciate having these responsibilities handled for you. Managing significant wealth can be quite stressful for someone without experience. Someone without experience. Someone not good enough to handle her own money. Someone who needed the Bradford family to manage the salary she earned through her own professional achievements. What do you think, Piper? Margaret asked, her tone suggesting there was only one acceptable answer. I looked at Logan one more time, giving him a final opportunity to intervene, to stand up for me, to show that he understood how insulting his mother's proposal was. He met my eyes but remained silent. I smiled politely and said the two words that would end everything. That's interesting. What do you think will happen next? Will Piper accept this outrageous demand, or does she have something else in mind? Let me know in the comments below. I stood up from the table with deliberate calm, still wearing my silk pajamas and hotel robe. You know what, Margaret? I think that's a wonderful idea. Both Logan and his mother looked slightly surprised by my agreeable tone. It is? Margaret said, though she tried to hide her shock with another practiced smile. Absolutely, I replied sweetly. It makes perfect sense that the Bradford family should handle all financial decisions. After all, you have so much experience with money management. Well, yes, Margaret said, clearly pleased. I'm so glad you understand the practical benefits. Logan was watching me with growing unease, as if he sensed something beneath my compliance that he couldn't quite identify. In fact, I continued, moving toward my suitcase, I think you should handle all the financial arrangements for today as well. Today? Margaret asked. The wedding expenses, the final payments to vendors, the reception costs, all those practical details that require someone with real experience managing significant money. He began pulling clothes from my suitcase while Margaret and Logan exchanged confused glances. Piper, Logan said slowly, what are you doing? Getting dressed, I replied matter-of-factly. Your mother is absolutely right that I lack experience with financial responsibility, so I'm leaving all of today's money management in her capable hands. Margaret's confident expression began to falter. I don't understand, dear. It's simple, I said, pulling on jeans and a sweater. I'm withdrawing my financial contribution to this wedding. Since my money needs to be managed by people with more experience, I shouldn't be making any significant financial decisions today. Piper, stop, Logan said, standing up. What are you talking about? I turned to face them both, my voice still pleasantly calm. I'm talking about the $50,000 I've contributed to this wedding, Logan. The dress, the flowers, the photography, the music, the honeymoon deposits, all paid for with my inexperienced, poorly managed salary. The color drained from Margaret's face. Since I clearly can't be trusted with financial decisions, I continued, I'm sure your family can handle the vendor payments scheduled for this morning. Logan was staring at me in growing alarm. Piper, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm completely serious, I said, closing my suitcase with a decisive snap. Your mother has convinced me that I shouldn't be making independent financial choices. So I'm not. Margaret had gone very quiet, apparently realizing that her morning manipulation had just backfired spectacularly. Where are you going? Logan asked as I moved toward the door. To make a phone call, I replied, to someone with appropriate experience handling wedding logistics. I walked into the hotel hallway, pulling out my phone to call Sarah Mitchell, our wedding coordinator. She answered on the second ring. Piper, big day, how are you feeling? Sarah, I need you to cancel the wedding. Silence. Then, I'm sorry, what? Cancel everything. The ceremony, the reception, all of it, immediately. Piper, is everything okay? Are you having cold feet? I'm having clarity, I replied. Please contact all the vendors and inform them that the wedding is canceled. The Bradford family will handle any financial obligations. But, Piper, the vendors need to be paid today. Final payments are due before services are provided. Then the Bradford family should pay them. I'm withdrawing my financial participation. Another long pause. Okay, I need to understand what's happening here. Are you calling off the wedding entirely or postponing? Calling it off entirely. And you want me to notify vendors that the Bradford family is responsible for all payments? Exactly. What about guest notifications? Notify my family and friends only. Let them know the wedding is canceled and they shouldn't come to the church. Don't contact any of Logan's family or the Bradford family guests. Piper, this is going to be complicated. I know. That's why I'm paying you to handle it. Use your experience with difficult logistics. All right, Sarah said, though I could hear the stress in her voice. I'll start making calls immediately. But Piper, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I hung up and returned to the suite, where Logan was pacing frantically while Margaret sat frozen at the table. What did you just do? Logan demanded. I called our wedding coordinator and canceled the wedding, I said simply. Margaret gasped. You can't do that. Actually, I can. And I did. Logan grabbed my arm. Piper, stop. We can work this out. We can discuss the financial arrangements after the wedding. I looked down at his hand on my arm until he released me. There's nothing to discuss, Logan. Your mother made her position very clear. My money isn't my own. I'm not capable of making appropriate financial decisions. I need Bradford family supervision. That's not what she meant, he said desperately. Isn't it? I turned to Margaret. Did I misunderstand your proposal, Margaret? Were you not suggesting that my salary should go into accounts you control? Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came out. I see, I continued, so I understood perfectly, which means I'm making the most responsible financial decision possible, removing myself from any situation where my poor money management might cause problems. Logan was staring at me in shock. This is insane, Piper. You're destroying our wedding because of a misunderstanding about bank accounts? I'm protecting the Bradford family from my financial incompetence, I replied. Your mother was very concerned about my lack of experience with significant money management. This eliminates that problem entirely. I picked up my purse and moved toward the door. Where are you going? Logan asked again. Home. To pack my things and move out of our apartment. Piper, wait, Margaret said suddenly, her voice desperate. Perhaps we can discuss alternative arrangements. I turned back to her with a polite smile. Oh no, Margaret. You were absolutely right the first time. I shouldn't be trusted with major financial decisions, like wedding expenses, or mortgage payments, or any shared household costs. You're being ridiculous, Logan said angrily. Am I? Your mother just told me I'm too inexperienced to handle my own paycheck. She's probably right about other financial responsibilities too. I opened the door to leave, then turned back one final time. Oh, and Logan, you might want to call the church and the country club. Explain to them that the Bradford family will handle all the final payments since the bride is too financially irresponsible to be trusted with money management. Margaret made a strangled sound. Enjoy your wedding day, I added pleasantly, and walked out. As the elevator doors closed, I heard Logan shouting my name down the hallway. I didn't look back. The hotel lobby was bustling with weekend activity as I crossed to the front desk to settle my bill. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even in the act of leaving my wedding, I was making responsible financial decisions. Checking out early, Miss Collins? The desk clerk asked with professional courtesy. Change of plans, I replied simply. As I waited for my receipt, my phone started buzzing with increasingly frantic calls from Logan. I declined each one, watching the screen light up and fade repeatedly. After the sixth call, I powered it off entirely. The drive home to Logan's downtown apartment, our apartment, I corrected myself bitterly, gave me time to process what had just happened. In the space of 30 minutes, I'd gone from nervous bride to single woman, all because of Margaret Bradford's breathtaking arrogance. But it wasn't really about the money, was it? It was about respect, about autonomy, about Logan's complete failure to defend me when his mother attempted to reduce me to a financial dependent. His silence had been the most telling moment of our entire relationship. I packed methodically, taking only my personal belongings and leaving behind anything Logan had purchased for our shared life. The engagement ring went on the kitchen counter with a brief note. No longer needed. P. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, showed 23 missed calls and 37 text messages. Logan, Margaret, Robert Sr., even Logan's sister trying to reach me. I deleted them all without reading. The only call I returned was to my best friend Jennifer. Piper? I just got the strangest call from your wedding coordinator saying the ceremony is canceled. Please tell me this is some kind of prank. It's not a prank, Jen. I called off the wedding this morning. What happened? Are you okay? I gave her the abbreviated version while I finished packing my clothes. By the time I reached the part about Margaret's financial proposal, Jennifer was making increasingly outraged sounds. She wanted your paycheck deposited into their account? Like you're some kind of employee instead of her son's wife? Essentially, yes. And Logan said nothing? Logan said nothing. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry, but also, good for you. That's completely insane. It gets better, I said, folding my professional wardrobe carefully. All the vendor payments are due today. Final payments before services. Guess who's been covering those costs? Oh no. Oh yes. The Bradford family is about to discover that their son's unemployed ex-fiancé was financing their elaborate society wedding. How much are we talking about? $50,000 in final payments due today, not counting the deposits I've already made that are non-refundable. Jennifer whistled low. That's going to be an expensive morning for the Bradford family. That's going to be an educational morning for the Bradford family, I corrected. By noon, I'd moved my essentials into an extended stay hotel room and begun the process of finding a permanent apartment. My phone continued buzzing with calls I refused to answer, but I did read the text messages that started arriving around 2 o'clock. Logan. The wedding coordinator says you canceled all vendor contracts and listed the Bradford family as responsible for payments. This is insane, Piper. Call me. Then, the florist is demanding $20,000 before they'll deliver. The caterer wants $15,000. This is punishment, not a solution. Finally, my family doesn't have $50,000 in liquid cash available on a Saturday afternoon. You're destroying people's livelihoods over a misunderstanding. That last message made me laugh out loud. People's livelihoods? The vendors would be paid eventually by whatever Bradford family member had access to emergency funds. But Logan's concern for people's livelihoods was rich coming from someone who'd allowed his mother to treat me like financial dead weight. I crafted one text message in response. Your mother was concerned about my financial management skills. I'm removing myself from all financial decisions involving your family. This eliminates the problem she identified. The replies came immediately. This is not what she meant, and you know it. You're being vindictive. We can fix this if you'll just talk to me. I turned the phone off again. By evening, I'd heard through Jennifer that the wedding had officially been canceled after the Bradford family couldn't secure enough cash to pay the vendors. The church service never happened. The country club reception was called off, and 200 guests received last-minute notifications that the wedding was postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. Margaret Bradford spent the day frantically calling relatives asking for emergency loans, Jennifer reported after talking to her cousin, who worked at the country club. Apparently, they managed to pay the most essential vendors by pooling family resources, but the reception was still canceled. Good, I said simply. Logan's been calling everyone you know trying to find you. I'm sure he has. Are you going to talk to him eventually? Eventually, maybe, but not today. And not until he understands what really happened this morning. What Logan didn't understand yet was that this morning's events weren't about wedding planning or financial arrangements. They were about fundamental respect and equal partnership in marriage. His mother had tested whether she could treat me like a dependent rather than a daughter-in-law. Logan had failed to defend me against that test. That failure had cost him everything. But I wasn't finished teaching the Bradford family about consequences. Not even close. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I woke up in my hotel room, ordered room service, and prepared for what would either be the most satisfying or most professionally destructive day of my career. Over coffee and fruit, I composed the email that would change everything. The subject line was simple. Conflict of interest disclosure. Bradford family business dealings. I addressed it to the entire Summit Financial Solutions staff directory. Every employee from executives to administrative assistants. If I was going down professionally, I was going down with transparency. Dear colleagues, I began, my fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. I am writing to inform you of significant conflicts of interest that have come to light regarding my personal relationship with Logan Bradford and his family's business interests with our company. As you know, Logan Bradford was recently hired into my department despite having no relevant experience, based solely on his father's position as a major shareholder. What you may not know is that this hiring was part of a coordinated effort to eventually replace me as Director of Strategic Development. I have discovered that Robert Bradford Sr. and his son Logan engaged in systematic deception regarding Logan's qualifications and intentions. Logan was never a genuine employee seeking to learn the business. He was a plant, gathering intelligence about my methods, my client relationships, and my departmental operations for the sole purpose of taking over my role. This became clear when Logan accepted my position after working under my supervision for only 2 months. When I raised concerns about this obvious nepotism, Logan stated that if the company chose him over me, there must be reasons I wasn't seeing, essentially implying that my performance was deficient. What makes this particularly egregious is that Logan and I were engaged to be married during this entire period. He used our intimate relationship to gather professional intelligence while planning to undermine my career. This represents a profound breach of professional ethics and personal trust. Furthermore, I have reason to believe that Robert Bradford Sr. has been sharing confidential client information and strategic plans with his son, who had no authorized access to such materials. This represents a serious breach of fiduciary duty to our clients and potentially exposes the company to liability. I am providing this disclosure because I believe our clients and colleagues deserve to know about the unethical business practices being conducted by the Bradford family through their association with our company. Logan Bradford's termination last week was justified not only by his lack of qualifications, but by his fundamental dishonesty about his intentions and methods. I encourage anyone who observed questionable behavior or inappropriate sharing of confidential information to document these incidents for potential review by our compliance department. Sincerely, Piper Collins, Senior Director of Strategic Development. I read through the email 3 times, checking for accuracy and tone. Every statement was factual. Every implication was justified by evidence. Every consequence was earned. Then I hit send. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, my work email was flooded with replies. Colleagues expressing shock. Support staff sharing their own observations about Logan's inappropriate access to confidential materials. Department heads asking for clarification about specific incidents. Jennifer called within the hour. "Piper, what have you done?" "I've disclosed a conflict of interest," I said calmly. "Exactly what company policy requires when personal relationships intersect with business operations. You've declared war on the Bradford family. I've exposed the truth about their business practices. Robert Bradford Sr. is a major shareholder. He could have you fired. He already tried to have me fired. Remember? That's how this whole mess started." My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, Robert Bradford Sr.'s voice was cold as winter. "Ms. Collins, I think we need to have a conversation." "Do we?" I replied pleasantly. "You've made some very serious accusations in your email to the company staff. I've disclosed factual information about conflicts of interest involving your family. You've slandered my son and questioned my business integrity. I've documented observable behavior and raised legitimate concerns about corporate governance." There was a long pause. "What do you want, Ms. Collins?" "I don't want anything, Mr. Bradford. I'm simply ensuring that our clients and colleagues have accurate information about the business relationships that might affect their interests. This is about the wedding, isn't it? About some family disagreement that has nothing to do with business. This is about professional ethics, Mr. Bradford. About nepotism, deception, and conflicts of interest. The wedding cancellation was just the final catalyst for addressing these concerns. You're making a serious mistake." "I don't think I am, but I guess we'll find out." After I hung up, I sat quietly for several minutes, considering what I'd just set in motion. The email couldn't be retracted. The consequences couldn't be controlled. I just challenged one of the most powerful families in the city's financial community. I felt remarkably peaceful about it. By afternoon, the email had spread beyond Summit Financial. Someone had forwarded it to contacts at other investment firms. And by evening, the story was circulating through the entire industry. Logan finally reached me around 6 o'clock, his voice shaking with rage. "What the hell have you done, Piper? I've reported your family's unethical business practices to our colleagues. You've destroyed my reputation over a personal grudge. I've disclosed accurate information about professional misconduct. Your reputation destroyed itself. This is because of Mom's comment about financial management. You're destroying my career over hurt feelings. This is because you used our relationship to gather intelligence for sabotaging my career. Your mother's comment was just the final insult. Nobody will hire me now. You realize that, right? This email will follow me everywhere in the industry." "Good," I said simply. "Maybe other women won't have to experience what I did. I loved you, Piper. I wanted to marry you. You loved having access to my professional knowledge and client relationships. You wanted to marry someone you could control financially and professionally. That's not true, isn't it? When your mother demanded control of my paycheck, you said nothing. When she implied I was too incompetent to manage my own money, you said nothing. When she treated me like a dependent rather than an equal partner, you said nothing. I was trying to keep peace. You were showing me exactly who you'd choose when forced to pick between your family and your wife. I'm grateful you clarified that before we signed marriage documents." The conversation ended with Logan threatening legal action for defamation. I welcomed him to try. Every word in my email was true, and I had documentation to prove it. The industry response to my email exceeded even my expectations. By Wednesday morning, Summit Financial's compliance department had received dozens of calls from clients requesting information about the Bradford family's access to their accounts and strategic planning. I was called into an emergency board meeting that afternoon. "Ms. Collins, the chairman began, his expression carefully neutral. Your recent communication to staff has created significant concern among our client base. I understand that, I replied calmly. Conflict of interest disclosures often raise legitimate questions. Some board members feel that your email was inappropriate given Mr. Bradford Sr.'s position with our company. Some board members are probably concerned about liability exposure if these conflict issues aren't properly addressed. The chairman's slight smile suggested I'd guessed correctly. Indeed. Which is why we need to understand exactly what evidence you have to support your statements. For the next 2 hours, I presented a comprehensive case. Logan's premature access to confidential client files, his unauthorized attendance at strategic planning meetings, his father's inappropriate sharing of board-level information, the coordinated effort to undermine my position through deceptive hiring practices. I had documentation for everything: emails, meeting notes, witness statements from colleagues who'd observed inappropriate information sharing. This is quite thorough, one board member observed. Professional misconduct should be thoroughly documented, I replied. The board deliberated for another hour before calling me back into the room. Ms. Collins, based on your evidence and our preliminary investigation, we're taking several immediate actions. I waited. First, Logan Bradford's termination is being upgraded from standard dismissal to termination for cause, with no severance or benefits continuation. Second, Robert Bradford Sr. is being removed from his position on our board of directors, and his shareholder voting rights are being suspended pending a full compliance review. Third, we're conducting a comprehensive audit of all client accounts that had any contact with Logan Bradford during his employment here. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Furthermore, the chairman continued, your promotion to executive director is being accelerated with immediate implementation of enhanced compensation and equity participation. I blinked, stunned. I'm sorry, what? Your handling of this situation demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity and attention to detail we need in senior leadership. You've protected our clients' interests at considerable personal cost. We're also establishing new policies for family member hiring and access to confidential information, based on the weaknesses you've identified in our current procedures. As I left the boardroom, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and disbelief. In the space of a week, I'd gone from canceled bride to the youngest executive director in Summit Financial's history. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Emergency drinks needed. Meet me at Morrison's at 6. By the time I reached the bar, word had already spread through the industry grapevine. Jennifer was waiting with 2 martinis and a grin. You magnificent, terrifying woman, she said as I sat down. Do you realize what you've just accomplished? I've reported unethical behavior to the appropriate authorities. You've taken down one of the most connected families in the city's financial sector. Robert Bradford Sr. built his reputation over 30 years, and you've destroyed it in a week. I've exposed behavior that was already destroying it. I just made it visible. And Logan? What about Logan? Word is that he's unemployable now. No firm will touch him after your email and the board's findings. I sipped my martini thoughtfully. Good. Maybe he'll learn to build something through his own efforts instead of undermining other people's work. You're really not going to feel guilty about this, are you? Should I? He used our relationship to sabotage my career. His father enabled systematic conflicts of interest that could have damaged our clients. His mother treated me like a financial dependent. Why should I feel guilty about documenting the truth? Because you loved him. I loved who I thought he was. The real Logan turned out to be someone entirely different. Jennifer raised her glass. To the real Piper, then, who turned out to be someone even more formidable than any of us imagined. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited about my future. The next morning brought a final surprise. Robert Bradford Sr. called me personally. Ms. Collins, I owe you an apology. I said nothing, waiting. My investigation into my son's activities has revealed behavior I find deeply disappointing. You were right to bring these issues to the board's attention. I'm glad you see it that way. Logan's actions were unethical and unprofessional. But more than that, they were disrespectful to you personally. As someone who worked hard to build her career, you deserved better treatment from our family. The apology was unexpected and genuine sounding. My wife's behavior at your wedding was equally inappropriate. I want you to know that I had no knowledge of her financial demands, and I completely disagree with her approach. I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Bradford. I also want you to know that I support the board's decisions regarding Logan and myself. Some mistakes require significant consequences. After we hung up, I reflected on how completely the situation had reversed itself. The Bradford family's attempt to control and diminish me had instead elevated me to unprecedented professional success, while destroying their own standing in the industry. Sometimes justice is poetic. Sometimes karma works exactly as it should. And sometimes standing up for yourself creates consequences you never could have imagined. 6 months later, I stood at the window of my new executive office on the 22nd floor, looking out at the city skyline that had once seemed so intimidating. The Bradford family's attempt to diminish me had ultimately launched me into the stratosphere of professional success. Executive director at 29 years old, an unprecedented achievement in our industry according to the trade publications that had covered my promotion. Not because of family connections or political maneuvering, but because I'd protected client interests and corporate integrity when it would have been easier to stay silent. The irony was delicious. My assistant knocked softly on the door. "Ms. Collins? Your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Send her in, please." Margaret Bradford entered my office hesitantly, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had demanded control of my paycheck on what should have been my wedding day. She looked older, somehow diminished, though still impeccably dressed. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said as I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. "I was curious about what you wanted to discuss." She sat carefully, placing her purse in her lap like a shield. "I wanted to apologize. For my behavior, for my assumptions, for the way I treated you. I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask, Logan is struggling. Really struggling. No firm will hire him. His reputation is..." She paused, searching for words. "Is there anything you might do to help rehabilitate his professional standing?" I studied her face, looking for signs of the arrogance that had characterized every previous interaction. Instead, I saw genuine desperation. "Mrs. Bradford, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Perhaps a letter to industry contacts, explaining that Logan's behavior was an aberration, that he's learned from his mistakes and deserves a second chance. A letter vouching for someone who used our intimate relationship to undermine my career?" She flinched. "I know how it sounds, but he's my son, Miss Collins, and he's not the same person he was. This experience has changed him. I hope it has. Will you consider it, please?" I leaned back in my executive chair, considering my response carefully. "Mrs. Bradford, 6 months ago you sat in my hotel room and told me I wasn't competent to manage my own paycheck. You demanded that my salary, money I earned through my own professional achievements, be deposited into accounts controlled by your family." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Your son sat there and said nothing while you treated me like a financial dependent. Then, when I refused to accept that treatment, he took my job and told me that maybe I wasn't as irreplaceable as I thought. He regrets that deeply. I'm sure he does." Regret is a natural consequence of facing accountability for harmful behavior. Margaret was crying now, quietly, but genuinely. "Here's what I'll do," I said finally. "Logan can make an appointment to see me. Not you advocating for him, not his father interceding on his behalf, but Logan himself. If he can demonstrate genuine understanding of why his behavior was wrong, if he can show real accountability for the harm he caused, I'll consider writing a letter." "Really? But understand that my letter will be completely honest. It will acknowledge his professional abilities while also documenting his ethical failures. Whether that helps or hurts his job prospects will depend on how potential employers weigh competence against character." Margaret nodded gratefully. "Thank you. That's more than we deserve." "Mrs. Bradford," I said as she stood to leave, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you demanded control of my paycheck, what did you really think would happen? Did you honestly believe I would accept being treated like a child with an allowance?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I thought you would understand that joining our family meant accepting our way of doing things. I thought you would prioritize Logan's happiness over your own independence. And now? Now I realize that independence was exactly what made you worthy of my son, and I destroyed it because I was threatened by your strength." It was the most honest thing Margaret Bradford had ever said to me. "Your son didn't lose a compliant wife, Mrs. Bradford. He lost a strong partner. That's a much greater loss." After she left, I returned to the window, reflecting on how completely my life had transformed. The woman who had tried to reduce me to financial dependence was now pleading for my mercy. The man who had betrayed my trust was now professionally ruined by his own choices. The family that had treated me as inferior was now acknowledging my power. I thought about Logan occasionally, whether he was truly learning from his mistakes or simply resenting the consequences. Whether he understood that love without respect's just possession in disguise. Whether he would ever become the man I thought I was marrying. But mostly, I thought about the future I was building. The clients who trusted my judgment, the colleagues who respected my leadership, the industry recognition I'd earned through integrity and competence. My phone buzzed with a text from my latest romantic interest, David, a colleague from another firm who was brilliant, kind, and most importantly, secure enough to celebrate my success rather than feel threatened by it. "Dinner tonight? I made reservations at that new place you mentioned." I smiled, typing back my acceptance. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. Sometimes the greatest victory is discovering that you were stronger than anyone realized, including yourself. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted leads you to everything you actually needed. I had Logan Bradford's betrayal to thank for that revelation. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when people underestimate you. Remember that your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it, and sometimes the most painful rejections lead to the most spectacular transformations. The Bradford family learned that lesson the hard way, but they learned it, and that perhaps was justice enough.